This experience happened when I was 25 years old. I received an invitation to a friend's wedding. This friend lived in another city, so I planned to stay with him for 3 days. I was looking forward to the wedding because I hadn't seen my friend in 6 months. However, the night after I arrived at my friend's house, I received an urgent phone call from my family. They told me that my grandfather had fallen at home and had been admitted to the hospital for treatment. Hearing this news, I felt very worried. I knew very well that my grandfather's health was very important to the whole family, so I decided to go home immediately. When my friend found out about my situation, he suggested that I return home the next morning. It was already too late and he thought it would be dangerous to drive the vehicle for a long time at night. Although my friend's advice was reasonable, I could not ignore the needs of my family. At around 2 a.m., I said goodbye to my friend and prepared to drive home. I was worried about my grandfather's health. I called my family on the drive and asked about my grandfather's current condition. They told me the doctors were doing their best to treat him, but the specifics were uncertain. On my way home, there weren't many cars. There were no highways like there are now. I was driving along a narrow country road. Suddenly, I noticed a pickup truck coming from the opposite direction and with its high beams on. It was driving in my lane and I hastily swerved to the right to try to avoid it. The road was too narrow for me to completely avoid the vehicle. Unfortunately, I collided with the pickup truck. After the collision occurred, I lost control of my vehicle. After running off the road, it fell into a nearby field. It all happened so fast that I didn't have time to react any further. After the accident, I realized that I was very badly injured. I felt pain all over my body. A few minutes later, a bus passed by the scene of the accident. They stopped immediately and decided to take me to a nearby hospital. They carried me to the bus and notified the hospital. On the way to the hospital, I became increasingly unconscious. At the hospital, the doctors began treating me. The pain I felt in my body was unbearable. I was lying on the bed in the operating room with strange smells filling my surroundings. I began to doubt everything and became frustrated with everything and everyone. I felt like my life was in a state of chaos. My mind flooded with complaints and anger. I hadn't been put under anesthesia and hadn't gone into a coma. Every breath I took was a torture. The pain from which there was no escape made me feel helpless and desperate. Suddenly, I felt a relief that I had never felt before. This feeling was the opposite of the pain I had felt a few minutes before. I felt like everything had become perfect. When I opened my eyes, I was floating above my body. I found myself able to perceive the thoughts of others. I was able to detect the tension and concern within the nurses. One of the nurses was thinking to herself how sad it was that this young man had passed away like this. I wanted to tell her that I was fine and didn't need to worry. I wanted to slap this nurse with my hand. Instead, my hand went through her shoulder, creating no touch or resistance. This strange sensation was very confusing to me. I began to realize that I was now in a very special state. I tried to communicate my thoughts to her through thought or intention, but she did not respond. At a certain point, I thought of my mother. At that very moment, I immediately appeared in front of her. I saw her concentrating on washing some vegetables and preparing the ingredients needed for dinner. This scene was very peculiar to me because I was in two places at the same time. I tried to hug her from behind, but when my hand touched her body, my hand went right through her body. I also visited some friends. I tried to talk to them and share my feelings, but they didn't seem to see me or hear me. It was as if I was in a parallel space separated from the real world. As I was thinking about my grandfather, a force took me back to the hospital in my hometown. When I entered the hospital room, I saw my grandfather lying on the hospital bed. I could feel that his life was fading away. The doctors and nurses were doing their best to save him. I flew to my grandfather's bedside and felt his weakening breath. At that moment, something strange happened. My grandfather seemed to be able to see me. Although he could no longer speak, I could sense from his surprised expression that he was aware of my presence. Even though we could not communicate with words, at that moment, our souls seemed to mingle with each other and we felt each other's presence. It was a connection that transcended matter. I placed my hand gently on his, hoping to convey warmth and strength. Although he could not respond, I believed he could feel my presence. Suddenly, there was a piercing sound coming from the machine next to me. I knew that my grandfather had passed away. My heart was filled with grief. However, as I gazed at my grandfather's body, a small ball of light emerged from his forehead. It was rotating and emitting a faint, warm white light. This ball of light became larger and larger. As time passed, the ball of light took on the shape of my grandfather. I couldn't believe my eyes and I asked him, "Is that you?" "Grandfather." I heard a familiar voice, "Baby, it's so good to see you." I ran to him excitedly and hugged him tightly. For a moment, time seemed to stop and our connection with each other was re-established. My grandfather curiously asked me, "Why are you here?" I told him about my experience of being in a car accident. Just as we were communicating, a tunnel with a soft glow appeared in front of us. This tunnel exuded an air of mystery, as if it were a doorway to another world. We decided to explore the tunnel together. The tunnel emanated a bright light. As we walked into the tunnel, the scenery around us began to blur, as if we had crossed the boundary of time and space. The scenery in the tunnel was very beautiful and strange. We continued to walk along the tunnel, our hearts filled with anticipation. In the tunnel, my soul seemed to be purified. At the end of the tunnel, we saw a dazzling light. I turned my head to look at my grandfather, and his face was tinged with joy. We enjoyed this wonderful moment where our souls found a place to belong. After we passed through the dazzling light, it was as if we had entered a home where we truly belonged. Here, I felt a peace that I had never felt before. All the things that I felt were important on earth lost their meaning here. Our souls flew freely in this new world. Everything seemed so perfect, free from pain and worry. Suddenly, a man appeared before us, his presence filled with wisdom and compassion. He reached out and tenderly held his grandfather's hand. I could feel the love flowing between them. In that moment, this man began to help grandfather review his life. From his childhood to adulthood, from his family to his career. Every experience was presented in a clear way. I could feel my grandfather's emotions, from laughter and joy to frustration and sadness. As the memories progressed, I also understood the growth and lessons that my grandfather experienced throughout his life. His life was full of meaning and value, and his love brought endless warmth to those around him. In his company, my grandfather's soul was purified. When the guide finally told me that I could not yet join my grandfather in heaven, my heart was filled with loss. I begged the guide to stay in this beautiful world with my grandfather. Grandfather tenderly placed his hand on my shoulder. His gaze was filled with compassion. He told me, "Dear child, your mother still needs you, and there are many lost people who need your help and guidance. When you return to Earth, you can use your experience to help those in need and give them warmth and courage." His words touched my heart, and I understood that I could not abandon my responsibilities on Earth. My grandfather and I hugged each other tightly and gave each other our last blessing. I saw my guide leading my grandfather to a large door. That door emanated a dazzling light, and it seemed to connect two worlds. After my grandfather entered the door, his clothes gradually turned into a white robe. This robe emitted a pure and brilliant light. His face also began to change, his wrinkles began to fade, and his eyes became brighter. His image was much younger and full of vitality. Behind the door, my grandfather turned and waved goodbye to me. Even though we were about to part, I could feel his love and blessing. In that moment, I understood that this was not a permanent goodbye, but a temporary parting. I believed that at some point, our souls would be reunited again. I watched my grandfather until his figure completely disappeared behind that door. I felt an invisible force bringing me back to the real world. A shining light surrounded me and wrapped me in it. After a while, the hospital room and the people around me gradually became clear. I was lying in a hospital bed, and the smell of medicine permeated my surroundings. My mother was holding my hand tightly. Her eyes were filled with worry. When I returned home, my family did not mention my grandfather's death, but I knew their hearts were also filled with grief and longing. That night, I decided to tell them about my experience. We sat around the living room in a somewhat heavy atmosphere. I told them about the experience of my encounter with my grandfather. I described that beautiful world. I expressed it in words of comfort, letting them know that grandfather was doing well now. In that place, grandfather had gotten rid of his illness and troubles and was living a good life. At first, they didn't really believe what I said, but my words and expressions were full of sincerity and determination. In this moment, I felt the eyes of my family gradually become serene. They might not be able to meet their grandfather directly, but they were willing to believe that he was living a happy life in that world. We sat together in silence, our hearts filled with thoughts and blessings for our grandfather. From that night on, we gradually came to accept the passing of our grandfather. In the past few years, I have noticed a significant increase in social acceptance of this phenomenon. More and more people are willing to listen to my story, and they are showing more interest in my experience. However, there are still some people who are skeptical about the veracity of the story. I firmly believe that as long as I can impact society in a positive way and give hope to those who are lost, that's the best part of my story to share. I don't expect everyone to fully believe in my experience, because there are many strange phenomena in this world that cannot be explained by science. But it is this unexplained experience that has made me more deeply aware of the meaning of life and the mystery of existence. I hope that by sharing my experience, I can bring a ray of hope and inspiration to those who are lost and confused. If my story can make them rethink their lives and find a more meaningful path, then that is the greatest meaning of my sharing my story. I am not a religious person. The things I have experienced are real occurrences. I am personally very open-minded, but fairly conservative when it comes to the paranormal. I also did not rationalize through religious beliefs about this experience. I am not in the habit of praying. I believe that when a person dies, everything about them disappears. In my thinking, I don't believe in the existence of a soul. I think it is just a figment of human imagination. Likewise, I do not believe in the existence of the devil or God. In 1998, my mother was admitted to the hospital with breast cancer. During this time, I was trying my best to take care of her and give her care and support. However, a few days before she died, I was under tremendous psychological pressure. I felt helpless and desperate as I watched my mother's condition deteriorate. I knew time was running out, and I did my best to make sure she felt relaxed in her final days. A year later, my mother passed away and I was in deep pain. Every day was a torment, and my heart was filled with sadness and loss. Stress at work also exacerbated my plight. I needed to cope with the demands and responsibilities at work. As time went on, I began to feel changes in my body. I had no appetite for anything I ate. I felt myself becoming weaker and more exhausted. On the 7th day of my mother's death, I felt very sick. I decided to lie down and rest for a while. Although I am not usually used to sleeping during the day, I could not resist this strong feeling of exhaustion. After a while, when I opened my eyes again, I was surprised to find myself floating on the ceiling. It was not like an illusion in a dream, but a real feeling. The weight of my body disappeared, as if I was in a weightless environment. I saw myself lying calmly on the bed. My clothes and pants were very dirty, and I was surprised to find that I had not changed my clothes for a week. I tried to understand what was happening in front of me, but I couldn't find any clues. Was I experiencing some kind of supernatural phenomenon? Or was I being controlled by some unknown force? The sight puzzled me, but at the same time, it also fueled my desire for the unknown. I hoped to solve the mystery and find a way back. I started looking for my dog, as he usually moves around me. I went around the room and still couldn't find any sign of it. When I arrived in the yard, the sight before me made me feel angry. I saw my dog was digging in the grass. This has been its bad habit, often destroying the flowers and plants in the flower beds. I shouted at it to stop. However, it did not respond and continued to dig into the grass with its head buried. This made me feel very strange, because usually it would stop whenever I shouted at it. I began to feel confused. Could it not hear my voice now? I approached it and then tried to get its attention. I shouted its name again, but it seemed oblivious to my presence. I gently tapped its body, but it still did not respond. When I felt confused, I suddenly found myself in a dark space. It was as if I was on a rocket ship, moving upward continuously. As the height increased, my body felt lighter and lighter. My desires and worries left me, and I was like a butterfly that had broken its shell and gained a new life. In this space, all the things I felt important before were meaningless. Without the distraction of my desires, I felt incredibly peaceful. This space was not completely dark, it was filled with a peaceful atmosphere. I no longer feel sad, and I am not plagued by fear. I can perceive many people around me, and although I can't see them, I can feel their presence. I am an independent individual, but at the same time part of the whole universe. This feeling may sound crazy, but it is so real and wonderful. I am wrapped in tranquility and no longer disturbed by the outside world. Here, I found inner peace. In this space, people don't need to use words to communicate. We are able to communicate directly with our thoughts. This type of communication is more accurate and efficient. On Earth, verbal communication can sometimes lead to misunderstandings, but here, such a problem does not exist at all. We are able to communicate exactly what we think and feel. There are several people who keep telling me that it is safe here and that I don't need to feel uneasy or afraid. Their presence made me feel cared for. I could feel their acceptance of me, and they encouraged me to explore and express myself freely. This type of communication made me feel very relaxed. I was no longer afraid of being misunderstood or isolated. Suddenly, a few people were approaching me. They told me that they were my relatives. They had been in this place since before I was born. The appearance of these people gave a mysterious and ancient feeling. They were dressed in simple robes. One of them claimed to be my great-grandfather, and his eyes were very bright. Although he had a full head of white hair, he appeared to be in a very young state of mind. His voice was low and gentle, revealing an inner strength and wisdom. In addition to my great-grandfather, several other people also exuded a similar aura. However, I felt some regret because I did not meet my recently deceased mother here. I asked them if I was dead now. They did not answer me directly, but only explained that in this space, everything is eternal and there is no concept of death. This answer made me very confused. During my communication with them, I began to comprehend the true nature of life. I realized that life and death are just a transition and that our existence does not end with the demise of our physical bodies. They conveyed to me a profound wisdom about life. They told me that in this eternal space, we exist in pure form, without the bondage of a body. In this place, I also found a river that seemed to flow down from a higher place. A huge tree was growing on one side of the river. And this tree was covered with peculiar fruits. These fruits were of a variety I had never seen before and gave off a faint white light. They had a very peculiar shape, like a cone. I counted them carefully and found a total of 12 colors, some of which I could describe, but some of which I had never seen before. Some of the fruits showed a bright red color, as if they were burning blazes. Other fruits showed a jewel-like blue color, shimmering with a crystal-clear light. I also found some fruits that were a soft pink, like a baby's cheeks. In addition to these colors that I could describe, there were other fruits whose colors I could not accurately describe. They seemed to be colors from another world, filled with a magical glow. When I touched the trunk of this tree, a warm energy penetrated my soul. My soul was cleansed on a deep level. This touch fascinated me and sparked my curiosity about the tree. I plucked a fruit, carefully placed it in my mouth, and took a gentle bite. In that instant, a sweet and rich flavor filled my mouth. I felt that my brain had gained a lot of knowledge. It was as if I could feel the mystery of the universe and the true meaning of life. As I savored the sweet fruit, my mind became clear. The answers to the questions that once puzzled me all appeared in my mind. I was surrounded by endless knowledge, as if I was in a treasure trove of wisdom. Every bite of fruit fascinated me, and I was eager to explore more truth and wisdom. I was ready to climb the tall tree, my heart filled with the desire for adventure. As I climbed the first branch, a breathtaking sight unfolded before my eyes. The leaves swayed in the breeze, as if cheering my arrival. The sun shone on my body through the gaps in the leaves. I continued to climb up and over one green barrier after another. The branches were interwoven into a complex network, and I kept looking for a solid fulcrum. Finally, as I climbed to the top of the tree, I was struck by the magnificent view. In front of me was a blue sky with the sun lighting up the entire earth. It was as if I could touch the clouds in the sky. Standing at the top of the tree, I felt satisfaction. In this moment, I understood the true meaning of bravery and adventure. I felt the infinite possibilities and vitality of life. After that, my memory became blurry and confused. I can only recall a long exchange with a man, the details of which I can no longer remember. When I woke up again, it was already the morning of the third day, which means I had slept for 3 consecutive days. If that was heaven, then my mother should be waiting for me there. However, I did not see her, nor did I see anyone I had known in life. This made me feel very confused. I shared this experience with 2 friends, hoping to get some support. However, when I told them, they became suspicious of me and thought I might be crazy. I can understand their point of view, because I would have suspected the same thing myself, before experiencing it all firsthand. Such misconceptions make me feel sad. I myself began to question whether it was all real. My memory was getting fuzzy, and I couldn't recall exactly what the man looked like or what we exchanged. Despite this suspicion, I could not forget that particular experience. I chose to understand and accept the suspicions of my friends. I did not mention the experience to my family because it was in direct conflict with their values. I understand that this experience was a special gift that helped me to let go of many unnecessary mental burdens. Although I did not meet God in person, I was able to feel His presence. This experience has given me a whole new perspective on my life. I live each day as if it were my last and no longer waste energy on things that are not important. I stopped worrying about trivial and petty things and focused on more important things. I re-examine the world and no longer see it in the same way I did before. Everyone is interconnected, and despite our different life experiences, we all have the same destination. Everyone in the world is searching for the meaning of life, just in different ways. This experience was very precious to me. It changed the trajectory of my life and made me more determined to pursue inner peace,